Welcome, travelers, to the Time Travel Trio podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Han.
And we're
The
Time Travel Trio. Welcome. Is that like time bullets?
That was time bullets.
Going.
Tachyon bullets.
Tachyon bullets.
Way to make it nerdy.
Well, it's in the Flash.
Yeah, like I was saying, we're about to...
They have tachyons in the Flash?
Sure.
If you find tachyon bullets too nerdy, oh boy, have you got a storm coming for you in this episode. We're talking...
Hyde, what'd you pick?
I picked The Flash, the TV show
Woo!
from the CW, not the original one that came out in the 80s, but the one now is out on the CW.
Mm-hmm.
The big hit, The Flash. So yeah, this show premiered, what year?
2014.
2014, okay. And became kind of a surprise hit.
I mean, yeah, for being a quote-unquote, not really a spin-off, but it's like, it wasn't the first in the Berlanti-verse of DC shows.
The Berlanti-verse, I like that. Everyone also calls it the Arrowverse, but I'm going to go Berlanti-verse instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a very interesting show. Actually, we've talked about this a little bit, so if you want to figure out more, we talk about The Flash. There is an animated movie called Flashpoint Paradox, which we talked about in an earlier episode. This is very different from that movie, and also has many diversions from the comics because it's a TV show and it's on the CW. So it's very different, but it has made The Flash a very popular character. Mm-hmm. So popular that they campaigned to have Grant Gustin be The Flash in the movies.
That would make it so complicated if it was like...
Yeah. I mean, he's a really good Flash, though.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
You gotta kind of have to separate the two.
Yeah. So we'll see how Ezra Miller does. I'm skeptical, but...
I'm holding out hope. I mean,
we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway, this show has time travel in it, scattered throughout.
Yeah.
So we're actually, even though we've made a practice of doing particular episodes and focusing on them, for this particular episode of the podcast, we're going to have to kind of more focus in general sense of the flow of the seasons.
Yeah. But I do, if you want to start or find a particular episode, in season 1, there's a 2-episode arc. That's episode 15 and 16, which is Out of Time, and then Rogue Time, about the first time that Barry travels in time. But we kind of wanted to, as Hyde said, we wanted to talk more about the show itself as a whole, because there's a lot of different aspects to it, more than just those episodes.
Yeah, especially in season 3.
Arc. Yeah, so that's kind of why we're not just particularly focusing on that. And in season 3, there's kind of, again, more of an arc, so it's hard to just pick one episode to focus on.
Yeah, and it's all on Netflix, so if you want to watch it, or if you're curious, it's all on Netflix, all 3 seasons.
I just binged, and I cannot binge, people. This was a binge for me. I watched the entirety of season 3 in about a month, and that was intense for me.
It's not a binge.
That was intense.
Yeah, you're not a big binger, I guess.
No,
I really am not. I'm not. So it was that was intense for me. The only thing I binge is beer, so...
Yeah, I started watching the show when it first premiered, and I think I was the only one of us at the time that actually started when it started.
Well, yeah, because you were watching Arrow at the time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I joined in pretty quickly after. I think episode 3 I started watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was in it from the get-go, and I really was excited about the show, and loved it, and then when it got to halfway through season 1, when Barry traveled in time, that's when I told Matt that he needed to watch the show.
Yeah.
Which was before we started the podcast, 2014. So that's how much we love time travel. If that helps you. So let's play the trailer. The synopsis, if you don't know, is... After being struck by lightning, Barry Allen wakes up from his coma to discover he's been given the power of super speed, becoming the Flash, fighting crime in Central City. So this does take place, we kind of mentioned the Berlanti-verse, Arrowverse. It's in the same universe as Arrow and Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow, so it's all the same kind of... Sometimes those characters pop in and out, so it's kind of fun if you're looking for almost like an MCU, but...
Yeah.
On TV is the CW, that's their thing right now.
Yeah, it's pretty serialized, so there's some episodes where it focuses on the arc of the season, or it's a one-off with the villain, or it's a crossover stuff. But you don't have to watch other shows to watch The Flash. I only watch The Flash, and it's great. So
yeah, So let's watch the trailer. This is the Flash trailer from season 3.
There's only one thing I know about life. I know some things happen by chance. And some things happen because we make them happen. You're safe now. I'm finally free. I'm home.
Hey, Slugger.
There's my beautiful boy. Is everything all right?
Everything's great.
You look really familiar. I've seen you before, haven't I?
Barry.
Barry.
Barry Allen.
Right,
It's fine.
sorry.
Some people are just meant to be in your life.
Hey. Who the hell is this?
Cisco Ramona's the richest man in America.
Is there a better way to get to work than by helicopter?
Cisco.
Don't call me that. I don't know you, String Bean.
We're not partners and we're not friends. You don't know me. You don't know my life.
We're something else to each other where you come from, aren't we?
This isn't your home, Barry. It's a mirage. It's already screwing with you and everyone you love, and pretty soon it's gonna take me right down along with you. What should we call this brave new world that you've whipped up for us? I was thinking Flashpoint.
Now who's the villain, Flash? Now who's the villain?
Before we even talk about anything, I want to say, and from here on out, I'm going to say warning, spoilers. We're going to spoil things for the Flash. So if you haven't if you're not up to date, you haven't seen all of season 3, whatever, etc., watch that first and then come back and listen because we're going to talk about season 3 stuff. Really interesting how Thawne's like, who's the villain now? And he is actually the villain in the season. I think that's kind of, it's a little on the nose, but it's like, you wouldn't think.
Yeah, you wouldn't think he's just spouting. Well, it's like the episode where they figure out that they capture Alchemy and they realize that Salvador just possesses people.
Yeah.
And he says, like, who is behind all this? He's like, the future. He said, I'm the future Flash.
Yeah, and people were so
That was like the theory.
the Flash's thing now since season 1 is like, who's actually the villain under the mask? So season 1, of course, was Reverse Flash. We didn't know who it was for a really long time. It ended up being Harrison Wells, who was Thawne in disguise.
But they kind of sprinkled that throughout the season. It was like it built tension because you knew that Wells was Reverse Flash.
Right.
But like in these season 2 and season 3, you didn't know. So like
Yeah,
there
well, I
was
mean,
less
like-
tension.
Like they're kind of building off of that, like the suspense of that. Season 2 was Zoom, and then season 3 we're like, we don't know for a really long time who is Savitar.
Yeah.
So yeah, rewatching it and then knowing that, I remember whenever he said that line, that was like weeks before we found out that Barry's time remnant was Savitar.
Right.
People were like, is there a comma in that sentence or not? Like, what does that mean? You know, so
Right.
And of
that
course
was definitely,
there wasn't.
yeah, so that was definitely a theory out there that, well, what if it's an evil future Barry or whatever, and that's kind of what it is. So, but that trailer definitely makes it look like Barry's in Flashpoint for a lot longer than he is. It's only one episode. It's only the first episode, and then he goes back, which I have mixed feelings on, I think, because part of me is like, oh, that's kind of nice, because then we just get back to where we want to be, instead of like waiting forever. Cough, cough, Twin Peaks. But at the same time, there's also, by the time he gets back, the consequences, yes, they're technically sprinkled throughout the rest of the season, but most of it is just in the second episode. And then we kind of move on and everything's fine. Iris and Joe are fine, and Cisco is forgiven Barry, and all this kind of stuff. And I wish that we could have seen more of the consequences, and I think if Barry had been in Flashpoint for 2 episodes and then tried to fix it for 2 more episodes, you know, to kind of spread it out a little bit more instead of just, Flashpoint happened, and now let's deal with Savitar for the rest of the season.
Particularly with the way season 2 ended, and the way that Savitar does not get, it doesn't, I don't want to say dragged out. Savitar did not feel dragged out in terms of like, wow, okay, you know, like let's just get this over with. with. Like, they did do a good job of, like, spacing it out,
Yeah.
but it was at the sacrifice of a lot of other interesting subplots
Yeah.
kind of getting tangled or mishandled. It's not the worst I've seen superhero show handles subplots,
Yeah.
like Arrow,
Yeah.
like Legends of Tomorrow,
Uh,
but, you know, Flash is, out of all of the Berlanti-verse shows, Flash probably manages to handle all of their crazy storylines. I mean, it could get really confusing, the Flash, if it wanted to. It deals with time travel, alternate universes, timelines, duplicates, different, like, romantic angles.
Yeah.
But it never feels super confusing. Like,
Yeah.
you're always able to follow it. Another show that does it well, but doesn't also have as maybe complex of a story, is Supergirl.
Yeah.
So I do have to give them some credit, but I'm with you. I wish there was just a little more fleshed out.
I
Just one or
agree.
two more episodes.
And I think that the thing about The Flash that makes it so that it is that way is because there's enough people in this world that we see on a consistent basis that are like the everyday man. Not every single person on the show is a superhero, which is the problem with Arrow now.
Right.
Arrow used to be fine for like the first 2 or 3 seasons, and then it kind of like fell off the rails and it's a terrible show and I stopped watching it. But sorry, feel free to hate me, but it's not good anymore. But like with The Flash, there's enough people, like Iris isn't a superhero, Joe's not a superhero, like, you know, there's all these people that we get to see.
And Wells ends up being a normal guy.
Is interesting, yeah, and you know, even Cisco, yeah, he has abilities, but he's
It's not his thing.
He's not a superhero all the time.
Right.
He's not trying to save the world all the time, and it's really nice. He uses it sometimes when it's convenient for the plot, perhaps, but I like that, and like Caitlin now, Killer Frost, like that was an interesting subplot. So I agree with you. I think it has a better balance, but I do think that this season 3 of The Flash was somewhat mishandled. I think how they created their story arcs and how they spread it out and what they decided to do, I think was poorly handled for some of it.
And the issue too is that like in that season they had a lot of stuff that like was out of nowhere, like the whole Gorilla City stuff. That was 2 whole episodes.
Yeah.
And there's a big crossover with all the shows that was kind of, you know, so they had a lot of things that were diverse. And that the musical episode, which obviously is great to see them all sing, but at the end of the episode, it's like, oh, this random dude just showed up and was like, I need to teach you guys about love. It's like, okay, so that was just a filler episode?
Yeah, it felt like special episodes that should have been sprinkled throughout the show, but instead were like shoved into this one season because maybe Savitar didn't have enough stuff to make it fill the whole thing. Season 2, I felt was, of the 3 seasons we've seen so far, was the weakest. I felt that Zoom was very boring.
Particularly after...
It's pretty predictable, too.
It was... Yeah.
It's hard... It was a hard follow-up to Tom Cavanaugh as Professor Zoom, or Reverse Flash.
Season 1 was amazing,
Yeah, season 1 was so great because we got to see Wells, quote-unquote, for, you know, all these episodes. We've learned to love him. He was tough, but he was a good mentor for Barry and all this stuff, and then we find out he's actually the bad guy, but
he needs Barry.
But he needs Barry, and so it's complicated, and you really feel for that dynamic that they have together, because it's like, they're villains, but you still can tell that Wells, Thawne, cares about Barry to some degree.
Yeah, it's so, even if it's like for an agenda, Barry has learned everything about being the Flash in terms of his abilities from his arch nemesis, which is a great it's a great way. And it's not like an arch nemesis, like, it's not like Batman learning from Ra's al Ghul, who then turns on him because he no longer accepts his principles.
Yeah.
It's because he needs the Flash to be a superhero for him to exist.
Yeah, and to like get back to his own life where he wants to go, which I love. But then Zoom, they tried to almost kind of do that again with Zoom, but kind of half-assed it. It felt like.
Well, his whole deal was he wanted to be the fastest guy, which is kind of a weak motive. It's like, oh, you want to be the fastest person, so you're traveling across different worlds and destroying the speedsters.
Yeah, it just was kind of lame, honestly, for lack of a better word. That whole thing of what he wanted to do was lame, and sometimes he would, like, give Barry bits of advice here and there, like a sentence or two, but, like, that was it, and then why does he hate Barry so much, and it was this whole thing, and I just, there's nothing that stands out to me about that season of, like, oh, I loved that episode. Like, I couldn't even tell you one episode that stands out in my mind from that season.
Yeah, I mean, there was an episode where they went to the Earth 2 or whatever, and they saw, like, Cisco have more powers, and the first time you see Killer Frost, but, like...
But then we end up seeing that in season 3 anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, what's the point? So, anyway, back to the whole subplot side episodes. Those, like, the Grodd stuff definitely should not have been 2 episodes. That was a huge, poorly made
Grodd
decision.
probably should have been the main villain of season 2.
If
They
it was-
hype him up a lot in season 1.
Yeah, if it was that big of a thing, then, like, make that, like, the beginning part of, like more of an arc over 3 or 4 episodes or something like that. But it was, yeah, that was no good. I did like Tom Felton in season 3.
Julian,
Mm-hmm.
Alchemy.
Yeah, he was interesting. I'm glad that he wasn't, like, the main villain, because that would have been just so obvious and too much. Like, oh, all of a sudden here's this new guy and this new villain at the same time. It's like,
Yeah.
it's so ridiculous.
It was also fun seeing Tom Felton eventually play, like, a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Because his whole career is pretty much, and he's even said in interviews, his whole career is just, like, his face, his look. They're doing Harry Potter at such a young age. Like, it's almost impossible for him to get cast as a good guy in anything.
Yeah, and I liked how they handled it with this, whereas at first, yes, we don't like him, because Barry doesn't like him, but then we kind of learn more about him and who he is, and we get more sympathy, and he joins Team Flash, and he, like, grows and whatever, and so it works out.
It's also a very raw deal.
It's also funny because, like, when he shows up and Barry doesn't like him, it's only because Julian points out how bad Barry is at his job. He's like, "You're not good at your job. You always breaking rules and stuff." And we're like, "Oh yeah, I guess he's right."
Yeah, and it's like finally someone actually, like, calls Barry out on it. Like, Barry's very much a goody two-shoes. Like, everyone loves Barry, and even in the beginning of season 3, when Barry goes to visit Felicity, when he's trying to figure out what's going on, she's like, "Everyone loves you, Barry. You're like pudding, whatever." And it's like, it's funny, but, like, it's true. Everyone loves Barry, and he's, like, Mr. Perfect and whatever. And so, like, even though Julian is, like, quote unquote, like, Barry hates him, but, like, you're not good at your job, Barry. You're there, like, maybe 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
Like, some CSI you are. I can do a better job than you.
Right. Which is kind of a diversion from the comics, because in the comics, like, Barry Allen is way more into his CSI work than he is doing the Flash.
And it's not like there's, a shortage of crime scenes.
No, not in Central City.
Yeah.
Jeez, Louise. But no, I think that's also what I did. Even though there's some missteps in season 3, I did appreciate by the time I get to the bottom third of season 3, there is a good arc with the Barry Allen character. Like you said, when you first meet him, he's ruined some people's lives.
Yeah.
He's done all this terrible stuff. Like you said, he doesn't do his job very well.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of gets humanized a little bit and kind of brought down to earth. And then seeing him go through this whole arc in season 3, it is worthwhile. It does have a nice payoff for his character growth.
Yeah. It's interesting to watch him grow. I do like his relationships with people and the dynamic he has, especially with Harrison Wells and Cisco and Caitlin, I think is the most interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Him and Joe is enjoyable to watch too, but after a while it gets kind of like there's only so many, like,
Father-son stuff
like
you can do.
plots that you can have. And him and Iris, that just gets old, to be honest. But I like his friendships, I think, with people.
Yeah.
So I think that's a strong part of the show.
I mean, yeah, early on in the show, like season 1, what I liked not most about it, but what I liked a lot in the show is the emotional moments when they just have, like, one-on-ones with someone, and, like, they're well written because it's, like, you understand both sides and you understand the issues, and then they actually, like, come around and they have some solid advice, and I'm like, oh, yeah, like, these moments where Joe talks to Barry about something, you're like, I kind of feel these, and just, all the different talks where they have one-on-ones, I always appreciate.
Yeah. And Tom Cavanaugh is my favorite character on the show.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. I think he's just marvelous to watch. Shout out to, he actually has a podcast with Michael Ian Black called Mike and Tom Eat Snacks. I don't think they do it anymore, but there's like 50 episodes or so, and it's literally exactly what it sounds like. Mike and Tom Eat Snacks, and it's amazing. If you've never listened to that, I did want to shout
it's
out to
literally
that.
listening to a farce on podcast form.
It's glorious insanity.
It's an incredible podcast. But so in the first season, as we kind of mentioned, Tom Cavanaugh's character, he plays Harrison Wells, is the bad guy, quote unquote. But he is the bad guy. But once he's gone, the end of season 1, then it's like, okay, so now where is Harrison Wells? So they get a Harrison Wells from Earth 2, who they call Harry, and then that whole thing happens. Season 2, he ends up going back to Earth 2 to his life. And then season 3, they go through all the Earths to find the right Harrison Wells.
Yes.
Which is actually kind of like a really funny montage of things.
It's great.
That
just Tom Cavanaugh being different characters.
Just being different types. So like each Harrison Wells is a little bit different and has its own kind of quirky personality.
It's almost like Tom Cavanaugh's like, I need to update my demo reel.
Yeah, but it totally works. It's such a fun thing. It's like, what kind of Harrison Wells are they going to get now? And like, they're used to him as a mentor. Like Earth 2 Harrison Wells in season 2, he was also like very much a mentor for Barry.
But he was more cold. He was like, I don't like you guys, but I'll help you out.
Because it's a whole thing, and then he works with Zoom, and it's whatever. But in season 3, they call him HR, and he's very quirky. He's not the smart one this time.
He's an author, not a scientist.
Yeah, he's definitely not a science guy. He like tries to motivate people by just kind of like talking out of his ass and like hopes that it goes somewhere by the end of his sentence, sort of a thing. But it's really fun. He has like this fedora on the whole thing and drumsticks and whatever. And
you know who he's like? He's almost a manifestation. If anyone's seen the movie World War Z, there's a scene in World War Z where they talk about like the unprepared for plan, and like basically they talk about how like the CIA and MI5 and Mossad basically have people who come up with a bizarre, impossible scenarios, and how do you solve this? Like, what if there actually is a zombie outbreak? What do you do? And that's almost what HR is like. His ideas are so crazy that they only work when the situation is insanely crazy, like his plan to basically trick Salvatore into thinking he's killed Iris West.
Yeah.
Like, all that's like insane plans. Like, the original Harrison Wells would never do a plan like that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I really liked... So towards the end of season 3, HR has some sort of a device from his Earth that can change his face. So, like, to other people who look at him, he looks like someone else.
Right,
especially
Mission
because
Impossible mask.
Yeah. So, like, Harrison Wells in Central City is not a well-liked person. So it's important that he disguise himself to other people. Obviously, we see Tom Cavanaugh the whole time, pretty much. But he uses this to disguise himself as Iris to trick Savitar, as you were saying, and sacrifices himself. And I thought that was such a cool, like, storyline for his HR character.
Yeah.
And it was emotional, but it was, it was just touching. It was really touching to see him want to do that.
Yeah. It was satisfying.
Because when we first meet him, he's not that type of character. He's the type of guy who kind of runs away when danger approaches. So that was, that was pretty cool.
And that had some emotional stakes, and I'm pretty sure we'll see more Tom Cavanaugh in season 4. So it's like, it was the perfect way to kind of resolve that whole thing.
So that'll be fun. I'm excited to see the next Harrison Wells type of person. And I do want to note that we've never actually met the real Harrison Wells from Earth 1, because Eobard Thawne killed him and took over his identity and body, I guess. Yeah. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it like sucked him dry of his body. Yeah, it was some weird thing.
Like it was human,
it looked like something
skin.
Jumper cables.
Yeah.
But so horrible. Yeah, human skin, jumper cables.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, but, if you want to start talking about, like, specific time travel stuff,
you want to talk about time travel and our time travel podcast?
Well, yes, but, we're on season 1 now, so we can kind of talk about, like, what happened. So, as you said, Eobard Thawne, he's from the future, year 2151. He was a fan of The Flash. Like, obviously, Barry wasn't around when he was around, but he loved him so much that he found a way to give himself powers, and he time traveled back to meet The Flash, and basically became his rival in the future, from what, quote-unquote, the current timeline is of the show. And in that battle of them fighting, I guess, 2024 or something, when Barry disappears, they go back in time to... Thawne go back in time to try to kill Child Barry, and that's how the show begins in season 1, where Barry's mom is murdered when he's a kid. So that's kind of how it all starts.
And Barry isn't killed because a future version of the Flash
that's fighting Thawne,
like takes him and makes him, like, brings him somewhere
Yeah,
else.
and in that time it's when Thawne kills his mom.
Yeah.
We revisit that a couple times throughout the show,
It's a little
but
messy.
that's how it starts.
Yeah.
It's just future Barry and Thawne, they're fighting, and his mom dies.
Yeah.
And then after that time is when Thawne loses his power, so he then has to take over Harrison Wells' life because he needs to make the particle accelerator that eventually would have created Barry, but sooner so that he can leave the timeline sooner.
Yeah.
So it's a long game he's playing as Harrison Wells to then give Barry speed and make us fast enough to open up the wormhole to return to his time.
Which ends up hurting him and all his hatred because he spends so much time watching Barry grow up. He, like, invests in Cisco and Caitlin and, like, sees them, you know, much. He calls Cisco his son more than once, I think. And it creates this kind of sympathy in him. He still has that hatred, but it's definitely not as strong as, like, where he just wouldn't even care about anything. Except for, like, destroying Barry. Instead, he, like, is smart about it.
Yeah, and at the end of the season, he wants to just leave. Like, he's fine with Barry being alive if he just goes back home.
Yeah.
And then, of course, bad stuff happens, and he doesn't, and it's a whole thing. But essentially, that's kind of the setup with time travel of the show. Mm-hmm. And then Barry, of course, time travels one day, and and the episode's pretty fun because, like, shit starts to happen. It's like he kisses Iris, and people, like, are gonna die and stuff. And you're like, oh my god!
Yeah, it's one of those episodes. It's like, wait, shouldn't this be like a season finale type of episode? Like as horrible as it gets starts to happen, and then Barry accidentally travels back in time.
But it's brilliant too because at the same time you're not expecting an episode to happen like that in the middle of the season. It was like I remember when I first saw it happen, and I was like, whoa, wait, what?
Yeah,
He just time traveled like. It's like episode, 12, and he suddenly...
Yeah, it's 15.
15, yeah. He learns how to time travel, and it's great because you're just not expecting it to happen. It's also great because it has my favorite scene of all season 1, where Tom Cavanaugh reveals himself as Harrison Wells. Harrison Wells reveals himself as Reverse Flash and kills Cisco in a great scene. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it gets erased because Barry goes back in time. Mm-hmm. But it still was a great scene to basically show where Eobard Thawne is in his mental state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a viewer, now we know everything pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so there's more tension.
Yeah, and I loved... I agree. I love that scene a lot, too. I loved...
Well, it also gives Cisco his powers, too.
Yeah, it does. And then Cisco sees it later on, which is cool. And so he kind of is trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And I love... Oh, that's what I was going to say. I love the scene when Barry and Harrison Wells are, having a conversation about it in the second episode part of this. Time travel and because we had just seen Harrison Wells kill Cisco and he's this evil guy, but then he's talking to Barry they're the best of friends and everything's fine and it's all normal.
Yeah.
And I love how
because Barry didn't know.
And I love how everyone played that. Was really cool to watch.
Yeah. That's pretty much it for season 1. The end, there's a little bit of a causal thing where Eobard Thawne's distant ancestor, who was played by Eddie, who's Iris' love interest in season 1, he's at the end of the season, Eddie's no, I have to realize to kill him, I have to kill myself, and so that's a thing where...
Because Barry and Iris have to be together.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. So that's kind of a causal thing, but that also leads to this whole idea of time remnants.
It also... before you start getting into time remnants, I do want to say there is also a different... maybe side effect is not the right word, but that's the closest I could think of, is that Barry going back in time and then changing things the second time creates a separate timeline we're following along now. So Barry, when he time travels, he goes back to the same moment that we had seen earlier, except so it's a few days before. But there isn't... At first when you sit... I'm trying to figure out how best to say this. At first when you watch it, I was thinking, shouldn't there be 2 of them?
Right.
But so this is why I wanted to bring this up, is because it establishes the time travel rules for the show, is that when something changes, it creates a separate timeline.
Right.
Pretty much.
Yeah, so the moment that Jen's talking about is, before he even time travels, he sees a second version of himself. He's like, wait, I just saw myself, and Wells is like, what do you mean? It's I thought I saw myself, but he's like, oh, maybe it was a shadow. It was no, it was a real person. But there's only one of them. And then we see him when he actually does time travel that moment again, except now we're at the other one. and then the other one vanishes.
Yeah.
So we're like, why is there only one of them? But I was thinking about it too with Jen, and I was thinking, well, that was the moment where the timelines diverged.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment, there's two of them, but then the one that we first followed went off and had his timeline. The other one is now in his own separate timeline. So it is a little...
And that's the Barry that we've been following.
Right. That's the new timeline,
Yeah.
pretty much. But it is a little
messy
because, like, why aren't there two of them in that timeline? But that's just kind of, I don't know.
It's kind of the rules that the show uses, though. So when we see time travel later, especially with Flashpoint, they kind of talk about this more in the beginning of season 3, where it's like when Barry tries to fix things after Flashpoint, where he goes to live with his parents when they're alive and whatever, and then he goes back, tries to fix things, and head back to the timeline that we know. It's not exactly the same. It's a different branch of the timeline.
Right. But yeah, so the idea of time remnants comes up because after Eobard Thawne dies, we see him again in season 2, but it's like a younger version of him before he actually went back and tried to kill Kid Barry. So he wasn't a villain yet, so they like had to help him out, and it was hard for Barry and stuff like that. But that was because it was like a time remnant of like a weird causal thing where he hadn't died yet in their time, but then Eddie was dead already, so it was like a weird thing. But we see it again in season 2. The only real time travel thing in season 2 is the time remnant idea, where
it's introduced.
Yeah, Zoom. In order to throw everyone off of him being Zoom, Jay Garrick, he made a time remnant that we didn't see him create it, but we see him die, and he explains it on. It's like, oh, it was a time remnant I made of myself that I killed. It's like, okay, so that's a little messy, but Barry uses one to then beat Zoom at the end of the season.
And how does he make a time remnant?
Basically, if you run fast enough, you like jump quickly back in time, so that way there's one that's slightly older than you, one that's slightly younger than you, and if the older one dies, it's fine. But that's where it's like messy because then there's two of them in the same timeline, which kind of contradicts the whole thing of.
It's also weird that
first season
because it doesn't always happen,
Yeah.
so it kind of feels inconsistent to me.
It's when
like,
it's convenient for the story,
yeah,
honestly.
Like if it was, you have to be going this exact speed or something like that, and then. Whatever, but like sometimes he time travels and there's no time remnant. Sometimes he does and there is. It's weird.
It's a choice they make to create one. It feels like it's a strategy. Then it's a strategy now in the show to make them. But the first time Jay explained it, Zoom, I was like, "What? How does that make any sense? You can't just kill yourself. You can't just like make a version of you and then say, "Hey, I'm going to kill you. Be okay with it." So I don't know. It's a little. I'm not on board with that whole idea, but it's what's happening in the show. But that leads us to season 3 with Flashpoint. We explained kind of he went back in time, tried to fix things, and it was different, and he had to fix them again.
And he tries to because things get crazy, but he gets stopped by Jay Garrick. I think you have a clip where Jay Garrick is explaining to him why the Flash just cannot keep going back in time.
And this is the real Jay Garrick who is
Earth 2.
He's the and he's the doppelganger of Barry's dad who died at the end of season 2.
Yeah. So sorry. This is after Barry had already tried to fix Flashpoint, and things are kind of still messed up in his real life.
Yeah. So his initial reaction is, okay, let me try again, see if I can fix it again. And so Jay Garrick stops him before he goes back again. He like pulls him out of the Speed Force and
mid time travel.
Yeah, which like. Okay, but
he's pretty good at time traveling.
Like, how much are you watching Barry that like you can pluck him out of this? Okay, whatever. So, this is the scene of that.
Where are we?
Motorcar Diner in Central City.
Yeah, man. What year?
1998. You're gonna get something to eat because I'm starved. The corned beef hash here is the best I've ever had.
That's why you pulled me out of Speed Force? Buy me a meal?
Because you're about to reset the timeline again after screwing it all up. Oh yeah, I know about that.
How did you know?
After your not so subtle reaction when you first met me, Harry told me all that happened with Zoom and your mom and your dad, so I decided I'd keep my eye on you for a bit.
Did he tell you anything else?
He did. I'm your father's doppelganger. Sorry about that.
It's just really weird.
I'm really sad, too. I'm sure. having a loss like that in your life. I see why you'd want to erase it. Who wouldn't try to save their parents? I understand that very completely. But the thing is, there are consequences to time travel.
I have heard all of this before.
Not from me, you haven't. I'm not some doctor with a theory, Barry. I'm a speedster like you who's traveled in time and made these same mistakes you are making right now. Now, let me show you something.
You know what?
You remember me, kid? This coffee cup right here, think of it as the space-time continuum. Whenever you go back in time, it breaks. Now, you can reset the timeline. You can try to fix it. But no matter how hard you try, it's never going to be exactly how it was.
Look, I've learned all this stuff that I didn't know before. Okay, I'm not going to make the same
Mistakes, yeah. What you just said right there, that is the paradox of time travel and also the paradox of life. I mean, if I only knew then what I know now.
Why have these powers if I can't go back and fix what I broke?
We're not gods. We're men who, for whatever reason, have been given extraordinary abilities. The question you need to ask yourself is, what kind of hero are you going to be? Are you just going to take a do-over every time you make a mistake, or will you live with them and move forward?
I like that he says we're not gods, because that's Savitar's whole thing, is like he wants to become a god.
Right. Very nice foreshadowing there.
It kind of feels, yeah, exactly. And it also kind of feels like Jay should be having this conversation with that Barry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little too late for that, Barry.
Yeah, perhaps. But
yeah, this leads into Savitar, though, if we want to get into that.
Yeah. So Savitar, as we mentioned before, is the villain in Season 3. He's a time remnant of a future version of Barry when Iris has been killed.
Yeah,
so he has the darkness.
Yeah, but it's a causal loop, and I think Savitar will explain it himself in a clip that we have. But essentially, he exists because he exists. So it's a little, it's the biggest causal loop that the show has done so far, and it's different from Eobard Thawne and Reverse Flash because it is more like it's a future Barry, so it's like, you know, it is different.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything else we want to talk about the Jay and Barry scene? We kind of really didn't.
No, I mean, I think
anything about it. It's just kind of, if you change things, it's kind of what we were mentioning. If you change things, it's never going to be exactly the same as how it was.
Exactly.
Basically.
And Jay Garrick has some cool scenes. Let's Go for a Run with when he unmasks alchemy and starts to figure out Savitar's true purpose is a really cool scene.
Mm-hmm.
Jay Garrick also takes a very big beating.
Yeah, and he, remind me, because you've been binging this, he takes Wally's place in the Speed Force, or Barry's place, or who takes whose place?
I'm pretty sure he takes Wally's place.
Yeah,
but he's in there, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the season, someone has to replace him or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, the Speed Force has a mind of its own. It's a conscious thing. Like it usually has proxies, like in Flashpoint, or I think it's a Flashpoint, where like it talks to him through different people. At the end of season 3, it's his mom talking to him, so like it kind of brings him in emotionally. But it's choosing to do these things. Like the Speed Force is a living thing, pretty much.
Yeah, Barry goes into the Speed Force more than once, and I think what you're thinking of is a few episodes into season 3. I think he visits the Speed Force or something, or he's trying to get Wally. I don't remember.
I think he's stuck in the Speed Force, and he's with his parents, but they're not really his parents.
Right. And he learns a lot about them, about the Speed Force. So Savitar, this is the end of season 3. Savitar kind of explains his purpose and how he got to be where he is.
It's like looking in a mirror. Well, not quite. You're not so scary without your armor. What can I say? I outgrew Red. I know what you are. You're a time remnant. A temporal duplicate. Created when you run back in time and meet yourself. You brought a remnant to life last year to defeat Zoom. Your duplicate died, saving the multiverse, and you continued your happy little life. And it would have stayed that way. But then you decided to play God. You created Flashpoint and changed everything. I went to the future. My future self told me that he created time remnants to stop you. That you slaughtered them all but one. Me. I lived. But a funny thing happened when I did. You, Joe, Wally, Cisco, you all shunned me because I wasn't the true Barry Allen. I was an aberration, a disposable hero. Future you failed to mention that, didn't he? How did you become Savitar? I was broken and alone. I wanted the pain to end. And that's when I realized the truth, Barry. God feels no pain. All I had to do was become one. And I only need two more things. For Iris to die, so that you are driven so far into the dark that I can be born. And the other? It may sound ironic given who I'm talking to, but I'll keep that one to myself. What happens if I kill myself? If I die, then you'll never be created. Cause and effect's a tricky thing. Didn't work so well for Eddie, did it? Shot himself in the chest. Dawn's still kicking around. See, that's the thing about time travel, Barry. The more you do it, the less the rules apply to you. But us having this conversation now, we're changing the future. Are we? My ascendancy is nearing. When I have control of all of time, it will be you who is abandoned and forgotten.
Do you know what that actually reminds me of is, do you remember in Doctor Who, The Flesh, when they're like duplicates of these people, and they're like made from this like chemical substance, and they're like are real people with thoughts and feelings, but like the real version of them is like they're not real, but they think they're real.
Right.
That's kind of like what this feels like. Obviously, it's very different, but yeah, he's got a lot of hate.
A lot of hate issues, a lot of anger issues.
Yeah, emo hair, or is it the future Barry? I don't know, but he has like
it's somewhat
different hair.
Of the emo hair. It's not as bad as the
facial scars.
Facial scars.
Literally only missing the goatee to be completely
I know.
like I'm evil Barry.
Yeah.
I wonder if Grant Gustin can grow facial hair. He doesn't have any stubble, so I'm guessing no.
Yeah.
That's either really good makeup or
yeah. Yeah, it feels a little bit too explanatory for me for like a villain to explain his whole thing. But I mean, you can also argue that, well, he already knows that he wants to kill Iris, so what's the difference in him explaining to himself how it happens? But I do want to say, so he kind of mentioned Thawne and the cause and effect and how that didn't really work when Eddie killed himself for Eobard. But if Barry killed himself, that's different. Eddie and Eobard Thawne are two different people.
Right.
These are both the same person, technically.
You have to wonder if it's a bluff, too.
I agree.
Yeah?
It's just like get inside his head.
Because I think if Barry did kill himself, that would solve... He wouldn't
Most
exist.
likely.
I know, but this show, they use these rules whenever they're appropriate, and what he said there is like, when you time travel so much, the rules don't apply. I think at some point, Zoom or something like that mentioned that like, yeah, I've time traveled so much that like it's different for me. Like I think that's kind of what the show thinks.
But I think it's kind of unfair because it feels like at the end of season 3, Barry has to be punished for time traveling.
Yeah.
And no one else does.
Right.
He's not. When is he punished?
Of
When
course.
is Zoom punished?
Zoom and all those other people die or get like trapped someplace. So it's almost like...
But it's a really long time before anything actually happens.
True.
It's like, for Barry, it's like, well, we were patient enough, but here, like, why are they trapping, like, these evil people? That's what I kind of struggled with at the end of the season.
We also don't know what's going to happen when he gets taken to the Speed Force. It's
Yeah.
very possible he could come out in season... I have a theory, and I think, it would be interesting to see if the CW and Greg Berlanti have enough patience to pull this off. It'd be very interesting if, like, the first third of the season was them trying to get find out what happened to Barry, what's going on, like why isn't he, like how do we get him out of there?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he comes back and he's like ascended to this level that Savitar wanted to be because he's like basically the Speed Force has made him stronger.
Interesting.
I know in the comics of the Flash, there's all this talk, and they touch on it in Justice League Unlimited. The idea that the Flash is actually technically the most powerful member of the Justice League. Like if the Flash like goes completely like into like the Speed Force, like he's unstoppable. They have him defeat a version of like Brainiac where he goes into Speed Force so much that he actually almost phases out of existence. And there's also a great story called Justice League Crisis on Two Earths where an alternate evil Flash uses the Speed Force too much and fades, basically ages prematurely and then turns into dust.
Interesting.
So it's interesting. There's a lot of different theories, and I agree with you, Matt. Like, it really is what serves the plot best.
Yeah.
But the Flash has come back sometimes even more powerful than, like, Superman to a certain degree.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's a trailer for season 4, so, I mean, I'm interested to see what's going to happen, but I don't think he'll be in the Speed Force first alone.
No, especially if this is any indication from season 3, I think it's going to be maybe an episode or 2, tops.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the other theme in season 3, other than Savitar being a future remnant, is that Barry visits the future, like briefly. I think it's like 6 months or whatever in advance, and he sees Iris being killed. And there's a whole drive of the last half of the season to try to change that future. And Cisco uses his powers to kind of like spy on it to like see if things are different or whatever. He can like vibe them, and so they try to like change the headlines they saw in the future. And obviously, they kept not changing things. They thought they did, but ended up like almost course correcting itself.
Yeah, their want to change things sometimes even created them to happen.
Right.
That sort of thing, which we've seen, I would say, quite a few times in other time travel movies of like trying to fix things ends up creating them itself. Even something like Time Crimes, kind of, you could argue that him trying to avoid being killed by
himself.
the man in the red badges, like, ends up creating that,
Right.
that whole thing.
And even like the Ben Affleck movie, Paycheck, that's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah.
X-Men Days of Future Past kind of teases the idea as well.
Yeah, so it's definitely a common theme we've seen. So it's good, though, to see it in this show, too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of time travel on this show.
Yeah, and there is. And there's a lot of consequences, too, which I want to touch on the consequences. So we've touched on it, but, you know, it creates a different timeline. So, you know, time traveling to fix problems doesn't work, even though Barry does it a lot.
Yeah. Like a gender of a character's baby was changed.
Yeah, in Arrow.
Yeah, someone in Arrow.
John Diggles has had a girl, and now he has a boy.
Julian was created out of nowhere, seemingly. Because, like,
yeah.
Either he wasn't in Central City or he didn't exist. I don't think we know for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, and people are different. The ways, relationships. Cisco's brother died in a car accident.
Yeah, Killer Frost, basically Caitlin Snow starts becoming Killer Frost, which eventually overtakes the personality of Caitlin Snow, who is aptly named Caitlin Snow.
It's almost like it's a comic book.
It's almost like, I love, not to go on a tangent, but I love the line in Spider-Man 2 where Joe Jenna Jameson says, a guy named Otto Octavius gets 8 arms welded onto him to become Doc Ock. Like, what a coincidence.
Yeah. Oh man, I love Spider-Man 2. So, scientific accuracy to anything?
Yeah, I mean, this is different because the show is very, very sci-fi. The science that they have is fun, but it's very sci-fi. I often have, like baffling moments where they make a gun that can reach absolute zero. It's like nothing in the universe can reach absolute zero. If you're holding it, it won't be absolute zero because your hand, the heat from your hand. So those kind of things.
How do you ever watch anything?
Well, suspension of disbelief.
Right, you're just like, all right.
It's fine. It's fun. That's why they have so much sci-fi in the show that I love it. Some of the stuff is a little ridiculous.
Like the gold gun, creating a gun that can turn things into gold. That's
the Midas touch.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, Cisco, he made it on in some guy's like dining room with not in his lab
with like tools of like in a kitchen
in a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's fun.
Where do
but
you get the gold from? I mean, how does it turn liquid? And like, there's so many questions.
I'm sure there's a Rosetta
Stone
in this world.
He got it from Velveeta cheese. It's liquid gold.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they were near a kitchen, so
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
but yeah, so the sci-fi is very fi, or the sci is very fi.
There you go.
But yeah, it's fun. I try not to get too upset about it. But the idea is Barry creates a wormhole whenever he travels through time, which is different from the idea of a tachyon, which is faster than light travel. So he's not going faster than light. He's just going fast enough to create a wormhole. Which I guess if you talk about the Speed Force being a thing that he can access, it's, less science and more supernatural, pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea is he creates a wormhole, runs through it, and that's how he time travels. So
Cool. So it's very relevant in the show, as we mentioned. It's used throughout and starts in season 1, and we see it a few times each season. And, clothes and sets, there's a lot of superheroes, so there's costumes, and it's very extravagant and that kind of stuff. So it is fun. If you like this type of stuff, we do recommend this show, although now we've spoiled pretty much everything that's suspenseful about the
So
show.
just be ready for season 4.
Yeah, season 4 is coming out soon as of recording this, so we're excited for that, and, we'll be watching, so follow along with us. I don't know.
yeah, I think Barry's learned his lesson at this point, so I doubt he'll use it again.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
He might,
Who knows?
but, unless it's like something insanely worth mentioning again, we're probably not going to go back to the Flash, but
Yeah, this is a pretty good point. We chose this at this time because season 3
Yeah.
finished, and we're like, okay, I think there's enough, and I don't think it'll happen again,
yeah.
at least in this magnitude.
Yeah. So, would you guys want to experience this time travel, I guess in the sense of being Barry through each of the different ways that he uses time travel?
I'm going to say yes, because first of all, it'd be great to be the Flash, to run really fast, and also at the end of the day, he's fine.
Yeah, he goes through a lot, but I agree. I think, he's still alive, and is powerful, and yeah, I would.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the worst. It's definitely not the worst time travel.
No.
It would be a little weird that, everyone's lives have changed because of, stuff you've done.
That's
They
a
get
lot of-
over it, though.
that's
It's
a-
fine.
But that's a lot of weight on you.
It's very
to
stressful.
deal with.
It season 2 and 3 Flash does not have a lot of fun. He's very stressed out.
Yeah.
But hey, at the end of the day, it all worked out, and everyone's fine.
Everyone's fine.
I think he's
You get
still
to
with
be with
Iris.
Iris.
That's true.
Ooh.
Getting to kiss Candace Van Patten would be pretty nice, and having an entire internet community who wants you to be with Danielle Panabaker is not bad either. It's like
Yeah.
you win no matter what.
Yeah. Okay, so anything else you guys wanted to touch on about the Flash? I did want to play while you're going through your notes. So it's kind of a thing that this show, and it started in the first episode in season 1 of Tom Cavanaugh's Harrison Wells being like, "Run, Barry, run!" And so they say
Yeah.
it a lot throughout the show. And so I found someone made a montage of the times that people have said, "Run, Barry, run." So that's what we're gonna play.
You can do this now. Run, Barry, run! Run, Barry, run! You can't burn in a vacuum, so you need to create one. Run, Barry, run! Now. Run, Barry. Run!
Run, Barry.
Just say when, Zoom. Run, Barry. Run. Run, Barry. Run. Now run, Jesse. Run. Now run, Wally. Run.
It's yeah, that's a fun...
Run, Forrest, run!
Run!
I mean, that
Forrest,
must be
run!
that must be a reference to that, right? Because it's so specifically
Yeah.
run, person, run.
It's I love the very first time. Run, Barry, run! And it's really
Yeah.
it's exciting.
Tom Cavanaugh.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean that's all my notes.
Yeah,
all different time
yeah.
travel stuff. I talked about what I like about the show.
Yeah, the show is really fun. It is enjoyable to watch. There's ups and downs. Not every episode is super strong. As we mentioned, season 2 wasn't super great. But,
The characters are fun. I like everyone. Cisco is really funny, and Joe's the cool guy. And
it's worth it to watch
Iris.
Cisco's t-shirts.
Yeah.
So he has fun, topical, not topical, but, sometimes topical, but...
pop culture kind of stuff.
Pop culture
Yeah.
and, graphic tees and that kind of stuff, and it's fun.
I will say, I do hope that season 4's villain is a lot more grounded. I would love to see a whole season built around someone like Mirror Master or Gorilla Grodd as the big bad.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see a non-speedster.
Yeah.
I agree.
How many more speedsters villains are there? I mean, obviously there's Jesse and Wally as other good people, but do something that's not a speedster.
Yeah, I agree, because it's kind of, at this point now, 3 seasons, 3 different villains, it's tired.
And Savitar was already the ultimate speedster.
Yeah.
So
hopefully it'll be different.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Do you guys have any favorite episodes that stand out that you'd want to recommend? The season 1 finale is the highest rated on IMDb, and that's a really good episode.
And then Out of Time, the episode we talked about.
Yeah, the Out of Time, and then Rogue Time is the second part of that. So,
I mean,
those are the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Season 1 is just good as a whole.
Yeah.
Honestly. Okay, final review. So we'll start with rating the show. So I'll start, I guess. I do love this show. It is fun. I like all the sci-fi and all the different villains and the character arcs, and I love the non-superhero, or I guess I can call them lightly super-powered people like Cisco and Caitlin, that are really the core of the show. But Tom Cavanaugh, of course, is definitely my favorite. So I'd give this show, I think, an 8 out of 10. There are some weaker parts to it. I liked the musical episode, I guess, but it was definitely a filler and was kind of
it wasn't a bad episode. It was just filler.
Okay, it's just kind of a mini Glee reunion. So
yeah.
It had its purpose, but it wasn't. It was no Buffy musical episode, which is one of the best musical episodes that's ever been created on television. Once More with Feeling, and so 8 out of 10 for me feels good.
Yeah, I'm right around there too. I enjoy the show. I always look forward to watching it. I always kind of seeing what they're going to do. I kind of thinking about what's happening. There's always kind of theories going around of who's this and what's happening. So I kind of look into that kind of stuff whenever the show is airing. And, same thing that you said. I like all the characters. It's fun. So I'll probably give it an 8 out of 10 as well.
Jess, I'm going to be boring, but I'm giving it 8 out of 10 as well. Just it has its problems, but it's probably, outside of the Netflix shows, it's probably the best superhero show on TV. As far as because the Netflix shows are only 10 episodes to 12 episodes long. This has to sustain the plot for 24 episodes, and it does a pretty good job of that. They have a few fillers, like any show that has 24 episodes. Unless you're 24, you're going to have filler episodes. And so, yeah.
Well, 24, they had the episode where Alicia Cuthbert was being chased by the mountain lion.
That's true.
That's about as filler as it gets.
That's true. That is, we have not forgotten 24. But yeah, no, it's a good show. 8 out of 10.
So time travel rating, I like how their show uses time travel, and as far as I can tell, even though some parts are a little bit messy, like how many times Barry goes back to try and save his mom and then not save his mom, and there's maybe not enough versions of him that are there that should be there, it's kind of messy. So I do have to dock a point or two for that. But other than that, really, the show is consistent, as far as I can tell. And it's fun. It uses it in fun ways. Sometimes it's the future, and sometimes it's the past. And sometimes people come from different Earths. And I like all that sort of time travel that the show uses. So I'm going to give it, I don't know, 7 out of 10, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it is fun. It's enjoyable. I do have a couple issues, like you mentioned, like when he went back to save his mom, officially save her. The version that he knocked over or something like that. That reverse flash disappeared, and his past version in the doorway disappeared. I'm like, what? Why would his younger self disappear? Does that mean that he didn't end up going back to see that moment? Like, you know what I mean? It's like a moment that happened in the show, but like it doesn't really make any sense. It's really more just like to see it happen, and then some things, like you said, are for the plot to happen, and you know. So I do enjoy it. They usually do have an explanation for things, even though I might not agree with it, like logically. But they usually do have something, like a character will say, how does that make sense? And someone has like, oh, maybe it's because of this. So they're at least aware of what they're trying to do. So I'll probably give it a 6 out of 10, because it is fun, and it is used a lot. So it isn't just to save the day. It actually is woven into the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Matt and give it a 6. It's good. It could definitely be so much more sloppy than it is.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
My biggest gripe with the time travel actually is less about logical fallacies and more about the fact that it's just like, you know, the Flash is not a time travel hero. He's someone who can travel through time. But at the end of the day, he's a speedster here. And I really... It's not so much that the time travel is mishandled. I just think it's so overused. And this is... partly because it's so overused now in the comics with the Flash as well. Like, he's not supposed to be a time travel superhero. I think they think that's the only way that the Flash can be interesting. But he's essentially the Spider-Man of the DC universe. So there's plenty you can always do, because the whole point is that his life is just as big of a mess as his timeline. So, you know, but 6 out of 10 for sure.
Yeah. So on Rotten Tomatoes, the show is currently at 94%. That obviously can flux up and down as the new season premieres, but that's pretty high. It's a pretty well-liked show. As you mentioned it, I agree that I think it's one of the strongest, if not the strongest show on TV, like obviously besides Netflix stuff. One of the strongest superhero shows, sorry. Not strongest shows in general, strongest superhero show.
It's way better than Game of Thrones, guys.
Don't even get me started.
Well, yeah, maybe not you.
Yeah.
We'll get there eventually, guys, because there's time travel in that show.
Shoot me now that we have to talk about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I might call in sick that episode.
We'll bring in like a special Game of Thrones junkie.
Yeah.
I'll just have some catchphrases that you guys can just play when you need me to comment something. How about that? And then I won't have to do it. But yeah, the show is well liked, and it is worth watching if you like the genre, as I mentioned before. So it was fun to talk about The Flash.
I know.
What's up next?
Good times. Up next is Matt's choice. What did you pick?
I am so excited.
Oh God.
No, this movie, it's going to be a tough one, I think, but it's going to be something that's nostalgic, and we'll see how it goes.
And what is it?
It's potentially killing nostalgia here.
Yeah. We maybe jumping the shark here, but it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Turtles in Time, I think, is the log line or whatever, but yeah, TMNT 3.
The turtles find themselves transported back in time to ancient Japan.
That's literally the log line. It's the shortest log line we've read so far.
That's it.
Yeah, sorry, Turtles in Time is the name of the video game, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, yes, it's the Ninja Turtles movie where they go back in time.
Also known as the Sacred Scroll of Death.
Okay, so that's the other name of it. Okay. Yeah, I've seen this, I think, when I was a kid all the way through. I must have. I love Ninja Turtles.
Shockingly, I have never seen this movie.
Yeah. I've seen it mostly being ridiculed online, like videos, like the worst moments of it, and like...
Yeah, this I have a feeling is going to be one of our episodes that is pretty close to how did this get made, sort of a thing.
Yeah. Well, the issue is that like they get sent somewhere, but the part that the movie is so bad is just the rest of the movie. Like not so much the time travel, it's just like how bad the movie is in general. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, that's coming up next.
Yay! Okay.
Yay!
Social media, we are at Time Travel Trio on Twitter and on Instagram, and we are the Time Travel Trio podcast on Facebook, so please follow us on all of those to stay updated on all of our stuff. And, we're also on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher, of course, as you're listening on one of those things. And please rate, subscribe, follow us on those if you wish as well. Personal, I am at Jen Marlis on Twitter and on Instagram if you'd like to follow me.
I'm at Foreman in Space on those.
And I'm at Robinson is Hyde.
And
with that,
we are out of
time.